morning. My name is LaRonda Dokes, and I proudly serve as a City Year AmeriCorps member at Kelly Miller Middle School. Something we like to do in the mornings to get our kids hyped is something called Fired Up. City Year, how y'all feeling?
Fired up!
So we want y'all to try it. GradNation, how y'all feeling?
Fired up!
GradNation, how y'all feeling about that 80% graduation rate?
Fired up!
City Year, motivation check!
Motivation check!
Motivation check, DC!
Motivation check!
Motivation check, GradNation!
Motivation check!
You
motivated! Motivated, motivated, let's get motivated. You check us out, you check us out, you check us out, you check us out.
Let's cut that out!
And please welcome to the side stage, John Gomberts.
Thank you, guys. That was fantastic. City Year is one of our great all-in partners in the GradNation campaign. They clapped us in this morning, gave us that little inspiration to start. And it's my pleasure to now introduce the great leader of the founder and CEO of City Year, Michael Brown. Michael? Michael? Did you guys lose Michael? Michael? Can you guys figure out what's going on here?
Show up for school.
That's a great idea, Caitlin. Beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop, beep. Ring, ring, ring. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hey, this is Sam. I'm one of your City Year Corps members. We're here at GradNation. Everybody's waiting on you, so we're just trying to get you out here.
Hi, Sam. I'll be right over. Thanks for calling. Thanks for remembering me today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, City Year. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, John. It's great to be here at GradNation today with so many partners and so many peers. Thank you, John. And thank you, City Year DC Corps. What you just saw was a couple elements that happen in 242 schools all across the country. It's some of the highest need elementary and secondary schools in urban America. City Year Corps members in their red and yellow jackets stand in front of the schoolhouse steps every single morning. They arrive at 7:15 before any student gets there, often before teachers and administrators. And they clap and cheer for every single person that comes into the building. So can you imagine if somebody clapped and cheered for you every time you came to work and knew you by name and recognized you and gave you high fives and had you dance through it? We do that to create a high energy, terrific school climate and a real sense that they can start their day with energy and power, and it has a dramatic effect on everybody in the building. And I love it every time I have an opportunity to experience it myself. The second thing that they do right at the beginning of the day in these 242 schools is they get an attendance list. And anyone that is absent in that school will get a call home. And it'll be from someone they know. In this case, Sam calling me and saying, "Where are you? We're missing you today." And they'll try to get me in the building that very day. And that's just by 9 o'clock. And then the rest of the day, we do what we call whole school, whole child. 10, 15, as many as 20 Corps members, really at the scale required, are serving as full-time tutors, mentors, and role models in the building. They're in the classrooms, and they're helping teachers differentiate instruction. They get focus lists of students who are already deemed to be off track by attendance, behavior, and course performance. They lean into those students all day. But frankly, every student feels that City Year is there for them. If there's a disruptive student in the classroom, which we know can cause so much harm with regards to not only that child's learning, but everybody else's learning, a City Year Corps member can swoop in and do behavioral management techniques with them and social emotional learning to make sure that everyone stays back on track. They also can find that kid with the head down on the desk and lean into that kid and find out what's going on in their lives and make sure that they are re-engaged in their education. They stay through the entire school day, doing evidence-based practices, push-in, pull-outs, one-on-one small group instruction. The evidence-based practices are in literacy and in math, using the curriculums that the schools themselves have utilized. Then they stay through the extended learning day, often till 6 o'clock at night, running after-school programs that are both enrichment-based and academic-based. And I tease them all the time. I say, you guys only work a half day. Well, that's 12 hours, and it doesn't include the commute. It's incredible what they do. And many times they stay till 9 o'clock at night, where they're running the parent-teacher nights, they're running Poetry Month, Black History Month, Women's History Month, and all the other extra supports, the extra people power in the building. Together with communities and schools, I know Dan Cardinelli is here, and with Talent Development Secondary, with Dr. Robert Balfance, we run an intensive form of all this called Diplomas Now, where we run grade group meetings with all organizations, and every 2 weeks we will go over the names of every single student in the 6th grade and what did they need with response to intervention programming, and decide, did it work 2 weeks ago, and what do we need to do now? And we have results from last year, 2012, 2013, that in our 80 Diplomas Now schools, and these are the schools that have the most intensive needs, the highest dropout rates, or the feeder middle schools that feed into those high dropout rate schools across the country. Together, our collaborative, which has been supported by AT&T and the Pepsi-Cola Foundation, have been able to reduce the number of students who have been attending at 85% or less by 41%. The number of students suspended has been reduced by 70%. The number of students who are failing English has been reduced by 69%. And the number of students who are failing math has been reduced by 52%. Excuse me. Yeah. And all of this is being now done, we're conducting with the help of an I3 grant, which is the largest secondary school transformation control trial in the country. Diplomas Now, we hope to be back with our partners in just a couple of years to share the results from a randomized control trial that we think can really be game-changing for the role of early warning indicators using national service and wraparound social and emotional supports in schools across the country. And finally, 2 years ago, we stepped back and said, well, how does this scale? And so what we've done is we've put together a scale plan that is aligned with the GradNation goal of 90% graduation rates across the country. We currently serve in 242 schools in 25 cities. We serve 150,000 students every single day. Our plan is to serve in 1,200 schools in 40 cities across the country with 12,000 core members, reaching just about 1 million students every day, focusing on the high schools that have the highest dropout rates and the feeder middle and elementary schools. And what we're hoping is that national service can be seen as a game-changing human capital solution that can help take evidence-based practices and education reforms that work to scale. And most of all, I just want to say thank you it's amazing to be part of this incredible GradNation Alliance. I get the privilege of working with these inspiring young people every day, which keeps me young. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary year, and it feels like we're just getting started. Thank you so much, and thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you to all the red jackets in the room and anybody in the room who wore a red jacket earlier in life. So, you might have noticed something slightly different about the breakfast this morning, right? In fact, I hear there's already a tweet, like, what's with the breakfast? So we have with us Chef Greg Silverman from the No Kid Hungry campaign of Share Our Strength to tell us a little bit about this breakfast and about school and food and the importance of healthy food in school performance. Chef Greg Silverman, please. Great.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed we work on breakfast in the classroom, but I think this might be breakfast in the ballroom. So it's really exciting. I think there might be a record. I might call up National Dairy because I think this is the biggest breakfast in a learning environment I've ever seen. So my name is Chef Greg Silverman. I work at Share Our Strength. Our job is to make no kid hungry in America. And I want to tell you a little bit about how that works. But first, a little pop quiz when it comes to what's happening in schools. We do research across the country, and when we've talked to school teachers, what percent would say they see hungry kids coming into their classroom? Any guess? What percent? Ooh, very good. 73% have said they see hunger in the classrooms. When we focus on school meals like breakfast and after school, we've done research with Deloitte, and what we see is attendance rates can go up by 1.5 days per year by having breakfast in the classroom. Test scores can go up 17%, and what that can lead to is what we're all here for, is graduation rates can go up almost in double digits with these kids. So that's what we're trying to really think about, is how we can sort of make kids have that change so they can learn and be healthy and vivacious in their lives. But let me tell you a story about a woman we've worked with, Yolanda Prim. Yolanda Prim is a principal in Pine Bluffs, Arkansas. She teaches she's at a school with 91% free and reduced price meals. So pretty much 9 out of 10 kids are having a lunch provided by the school. She got to the school and realized very few kids were getting the school breakfast that was offered in the cafeteria. And kids were coming into the nurse's office sick, attendance problems, behavioral issues, test scores were down. And we worked with her, and she said, I can bring breakfast to the classroom to every one of my students. And within a year, 330 kids a day were having breakfast in their classrooms. A year before, 330 total meals were served at breakfast per month. So exponential growth, and she's seeing test scores go up, behavioral problems go down, and she's really excited. And that's what we try to really work on, making no kid hungry so that they can learn, so kids can learn. But I might have this orange chef coat on because I am a chef. Breakfast is one thing, but I also like to cook lunch. I like to cook dinner. I like to cook snacks after school. I like to cook in the summer. And that's sort of how we think about our work at Share Our Strength. We think no kid should be hungry, not just at lunch, not just at breakfast, but 365 days a year. So we want to help kids where they live, where they learn, and where they play. We think in America, we have the ability to make this happen. We know we have the food. We have the federal nutrition program that can make this happen. We have parents, caregivers, amazing advocates, and community members like you all who can make this happen. But sometimes that's not enough. So that's where No Kid Hungry sort of sits, and where we try to work to help promote this work and push it forward. And we do this in 3 ways. So we think the federal food nutrition program is powerful, but we need to push it further. So we talked about school breakfast. That's an important place. We also find that after school, we want to get kids meals. And as well, in the summer, when kids are really struggling, we want to have access to those summer meal sites, whether people are providers or they're actually sponsors of these sites, which is all provided by the federal government. And these programs are great, but we need to raise awareness, and that's the second piece. So what we do across the country is we talk with governors, we talk with mayors, we talk with council members, school boards. We work together to raise awareness about these issues and how they can implement these programs in their schools, in their communities, in their states. Sometimes we elevate it to the point of helping pass legislation to increase breakfast participation. We've done it in Maryland, we've helped in Arkansas and Colorado. At the national level, we think about what happened with the Farm Bill in promoting SNAP. Next year, an even bigger bill's coming through with the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Bill for 2015. All these programs are on the table, and we need to make sure people are ready to help support them. And we work with chefs and corporate groups, teachers, groups all across the country to help make this change. So access and awareness. And the third piece, where sort of my heart lies, is making cooking matter. So we have a program called Cooking Matters, very simple. We teach low-income families how to shop for and cook healthy, affordable, delicious food. It's a simple concept. We bring thousands of volunteers across the country to run these courses and tours. Anyone can go online, learn how to be a tour leader to run a grocery store tour in your community. And you can check it out downstairs at Main Street. We'll be having a whole grocery store set up. You can learn a bit more about Cooking Matters and about the No Kid Hungry campaign. And we're really excited to be here. And for me, being here the last day, I've realized one thing, like, I'm the one with the chef coat, I'm a chef, but I realize, like, we're all chefs here because we're all cooking up change in what I hope to be is a No Kid Hungry nation, which also is a grad nation, which should be the power of our nation. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matthew Hart.
Good morning. On behalf of America's Promise Alliance and the Gateway to College program, I'd like to thank everyone here for showing real support for our shared goal, helping the youth graduate from high school and find success in their lives. We are the youth of today, and we are the makers of tomorrow. Many events in my life have led me off the path to graduation and all the dreams that follow, but those same events have helped lead me to Gateway to College, a real second chance. Honestly, I've been abused by my parents, I've been hated by my parents, I inflicted self-harm reaching for some redemption, but I've learned not to regret my past. One's life is meant to be unique, and that uniqueness makes the world a dynamic and more beautiful place. Imagine a life without any stress. Is that a real life? One's road to a high school diploma will always be painted with stressors, but the struggles we endure chasing them dreams makes the capturing of them dreams more fulfilling. The sacrifices we make are what fuels and motivates us to reach our goals. I've been offered the opportunity here today to represent the youth in America, particularly those of us who couldn't take the traditional route to graduation. Personally, I knew I needed support, but with my fractured relationship with my family, I knew I would have to go out and get it myself. There's litter in the gutters, the homeless and forgotten are lying everywhere, and I knew I didn't want that for myself. I knew I was capable of so much more. If you want to know how you can help youth, give us options. Honestly, we need more than what has worked for us in the past. When we find ourselves at crossroads, don't be afraid to guide us back on track if we make a wrong choice. Don't tell us what path worked for you. Work with us to reach our common destination of success. Everyone's path is unique. It is that uniqueness that bonds all of us together. And please listen to my generation. Don't simply blanket us with labels. When I say Camden, New Jersey, people instantly think of chalk outline, police tape, and top 10 list of cities with high levels of crime. But there is good in everything, in every person, in every place. To the youth of America, understand that we have a role too. We need to be agents of our own success. There is support out there, but when it doesn't come to you, you need to seek it out like I did when I found a real second chance at Gateway to College. Adults may tell us to make our beds, but we are the ones who are going to sleep in those beds. We are the youth of today, and we are the makers of tomorrow. Now, allow me to introduce a man who is working so hard to make today a better day for the youth, a man who is for the youth and enjoys our accomplishments. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming one of yesterday's youths and one of today's great mentors, the Honorable United States Senator Cory Booker.
So good morning, everybody. You know, my staff had prepared this speech. I was going to come here and read the speech, but then I looked at this crowd and figured out you guys need to wake up a little bit. The last thing you need is another United States senator coming up here and boring you to death. I want you to know that this is such an inspiring room to me because there are so many dedicated, focused, courageous, unyielding leaders in this room. One of them, Alma Powell, who's been such an inspiration to me for a very, very long time. And she has so much in common with my mother, which I have to be clear with you all, scares me terribly. Look, we are all involved in a noble pursuit. When our children stand together every single day across this country and put a hand over their heart and profess these words, we call it a pledge. They say the words, liberty and justice for all. Not just for some, not just for those who are born in certain privileged circumstances, not just those who have wealth or privilege or opportunity, but every single child. It's the idea in America that every kid born, no matter what circumstances, what geography, what race, what religion, what sexual orientation, every single child should have the nurturing environment with which to rise, to develop their genius and to contribute. Now, I remember when I was in high school, I had a great speaker come in and try to give us this understanding that not only did we have in the high school that I went to that nurturing ground, but we had an obligation to go out and achieve. And it was a great speech because he talked about achievement being not just developing the most that you could out of yourself, but finding ways to give back. And at the end of this speech, I'll never forget this because I was terrified when I was younger about speaking in front of crowds. And I would have to try all these things just to try to get myself comfortable. And I loved what he did in his speech because it was things I could use if I was ever forced to speak. And one of the things he did was this exercise with the crowd he spoke to where he said, I want everybody to raise their hand the highest. And we were sitting there like we are right now. And he said, come on, put your hands up, raise it as high as you can. And we all did. Some of us were tired or whatever. But he says, come on now. I want everybody, the highest you can, you got it? And we said, yes. He said, no, go 3 inches higher. And we all squeezed out 3 inches higher. And I'll never forget, it was a wonderful little message he gave us after that about you can always do more, you can always give more. About a year later, I was now a college student, a freshman, and I was working in a place in the East Palo Alto area of California. It's a low-income community. We were working with kids in a community center, and I'll never forget that at the end of it, I was asked to say some words to some of the kids that were gathered there, and being that I didn't have my own material, there's an old saying that says, good speakers borrow, great speakers steal. I decided to do this exercise with the kids, and I said, okay, kids, come on, everybody put your hands up as high as you can, and immediately, all the kids looked at me like, oh, come on, man, I'm tired. I don't want to do this. One eager kid shot his hand up, and the other kids made fun of him. Put your hand down, man. You got BO. Stop that. And so at that point, I resorted to a very base form of persuasion called bribery. And I reached into my pocket and pulled out $5 and said, $5 to the kid that can raise his hand the highest. Now, I don't care what a child is, what background they come from. Every single kid has an innate capitalistic instinct in them. And at this point, all these hands just shot up in the air. And I stood there with smug satisfaction as I was watching the kids compare themselves. And I was about to pounce on there with my, you can always do 3 inches higher. But then over to my left, there was a young kid who was the shortest of them all, the youngest of them all, came from a tough background, very similar to my father, in fact, and I felt this kinship with him. But immediately I said, oh, why did I do this exercise? His arms were crossed, his face was in a pout, and I thought to myself, why did I do this? And I walked over to give him pity and to put my hand on him and said, don't worry about it, all the kids are taller than you, this is just an exercise. But as soon as I walked over to him, he spun around, and before I could even get close to him, he started running out of the gym as fast as his little legs could carry him. And I just ran after him and picked him up, and he was wiggling in my arms. And I said, Robert, what's wrong? Where are you going? And he said, let me go, let me go. And I said, where are you going? And he looked at me and he said, you said you'd give $5 to the kid who could raise his hand the highest, right? And I said, yeah. And he looked over at the kids, still struggling with their hands in the air, and then looked back at me and said, with a wisdom that betrayed his age, he said, well, let me go because I know a way to get to the roof. I gave him the $5. You all have been at this now for many hours, and there have been some pretty incredible speakers up here, some of which I just heard. But my point is very simple. Every single one of our kids has a genius that will blow away even our expectations. This kid almost was looking at me. The child is a teacher of the man. He said to me, look, you think in terms of 3 inches, but that's not how I think. I'm thinking in terms of how do I get to that roof? How do I blow away their expectations? And you need to either help lead, follow me, or get out of my way. Let me go. And so what frustrates me now as many years hence is that I know there are so many things that our society should be doing and could be doing to make a dramatic difference in the ability for our children to exceed our expectations. I love my mom. She says to me things like, you know, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. And because she says, I astonish her. But that's because in so many ways, our society has done a good job conspiring to help some kids, but we're failing to do those obvious things we need to do to help level the playing field and empower all of our kids. We could brag about 80% of our kids being successful through high school, but to me, that's nothing to brag about, when I know that 100% of our kids born in this nation have the potential to succeed. And so, as a senator, I'm looking at what are those Archimedes points. Archimedes said, give me the right lever, I can change the world. What are those obvious things that we should be doing? Well, some of them, as my staff put in the speech, the data, and the statistics, are things like early childhood education. We know that for every dollar spent in early childhood education, we get about $7 back in terms of the success and productivity of children along their way. But what we also know is that the lower the income families, low income and moderate income families, do not get the same access to early childhood education as all other kids. This is something that is not a matter of can we do something about it, it just has to do with the collective will of our society. Let me give you another example. There's something that I'm pushing called nurse-family partnerships. We know some people like nurse-family partnerships, but we know that just having, and with at-risk pregnancies, a nurse come to the house and visit with a pregnant mother or in the first year of that child's life, it creates dramatic returns on that investment. It's this crazy understanding that we could either pay a little bit in the beginning of a child's life or make up for it by paying a lot on the latter end. Nurse-family partnerships return hundreds percent on the investment in nurse, and actually they lower the rates of visits to hospital emergency rooms. They raise rates of student achievement. They actually lower rates of involvement with criminal activity, not just for the child, but for the mother as well. It seems with so many of these things, from nurse-family partnerships to early childhood education, that we get that African story wrong. That story about the man walking along the beach and he sees a child in the river and dives into the river to save this little small child. This toddler pulls him to the river, puts him on the beach, then turns around and sees another child, jumps back in the river, heroically saving that one child, and then jumps back in the river because he sees yet another child. Now he's exhausted and tired, but every time he gets a child to the river, he sees another one, and then he looks up and there's a man walking along the shore, sees him, they have eye contact, and sees him struggling, but doesn't even get in the water to help him. He just keeps walking up the river. And the man yells, "You see me here, help me, there are children in this river." And the man says no, and keeps walking, and the man now screams at him, "You callous, uncaring man, why aren't you coming in this river?" And the guy looks at him. He says, "Why am I not going to the river?" He goes, "Because I'm going to the top of the river to figure out why the kids are in the water in the first place." It's this understanding that we could be doing so much more if we focus on our children in their earliest of years, if we work to empower people. And I get frustrated because there are things that I hear from public officials who often are just talking down to our young people. Look, you're going to hear me more and more in the coming months and years of my life, focusing on an outrageously broken criminal justice system, where you see a drug war that's completely failed, where you have folks, especially in urban communities, being targeted in ways that make them so much more likely to be arrested and criminalized for their activities than other folks, where you see minorities way overrepresented. In New Jersey, for example, blacks are about 14% of the state's population, but make up over 60% of the prison population. And I'll never forget that around a Father's Day, you hear people in churches or public officials say, "Hey, if you bring a child into this world, raise that child." And that's wonderful. You can get lots of people applauding, yes, of course, but we begin not to see the things that undermine the success of our communities. When I worked in Newark, there was a startup program called the Fatherhood Center that recognized that children often most likely to go to prison are children of incarcerated adults. That what we create is this prison-to-school pipeline that must be broken, and that frankly, if we made the right strategic investments, we could break those pipelines. And by the way, the criminal justice system wastefully spends billions of our taxpayer dollars arresting the same people over and over again, getting folks caught in a trap. As opposed to seeing that as a time to intervene, we see that time to double down on the draconian practices of a criminal justice system that's broken. And so what we saw with this One Fatherhood program in Newark, New Jersey, we saw a simple reality where if instead of preaching to guys, if we actually talked to them and worked with them, this organization created a fraternity called Delta Alpha Delta Sigma, DADS, and brought guys coming out of prison together to give them mentors. Mentoring is something that has a powerful impact on the outcomes of children. Something I heard Ms. Powell talk about for so long. I've seen it in my own life. I often wonder if you could just mentor a child for 4 hours a day, it has dramatically different outcomes. 4 hours a month, excuse me, you have dramatically different outcomes. Why aren't more of us doing it? The amount of time it takes to watch your favorite TV show in a month, you could actually spend that mentoring and have a dramatic outcome. But this was a dramatically different outcome. But this was a mentoring program for adults coming out of prison. And not only did we get male mentors for the kids, this program did, but they actually partnered them with others that gave them parenting classes and gave them group activities for their kids, brought the mother of the child together with the father of a child to work out a joint parenting policies, and then actually helped connect them to work. It was a program that used to blow me away because not only did it drop recidivism rates below 10%, but also it had tremendous outcomes for the involvement of that parent with the child and the success of that child. I say all this to let you know that there are things that we know we could be and should be doing, but yet we don't see them happening like they should in our society. We have so much power, but we haven't learned that lesson from Alice Walker, who says the most common way we give up our power is not realizing we have it in the first place. So many Americans of goodwill allow their inability to do everything to undermine their determination to do something. We allow ourselves to get caught up in this mistaken belief that we don't have the ability to transform outcomes for our children. Well, that's got to stop. And this is what inspires me about this room. Look, I don't mean to end on a negative point, but I was mayor up until November 1st of last year. And I'll never forget the unfortunate reality we see in this country, which is our inability to act, to invest, to care for our kids enough to do what we know works on a larger scale produces horrible outcomes. When I was first elected mayor, I was living in these high-rise public housing projects. I had lived there for about 8 years and got to know lots of the kids in the building. And I'll never forget, in the months before my mayor's race started back in 2005, 2006, I would come into the lobby of the building in which I lived, and there would be a bunch of young fellas hanging out. And I used to talk with them and joke with them. I'd come home from a long day, and we'd laugh and we'd joke, and I'd go up in the elevator, and some nights I'd come home, and I'd remember I'd stop by the store, grab some food, and share it with the guys as we grabbed a bite of stuff we probably shouldn't have been eating after I saw the gentleman before. But as I got a little older, I started seeing gang signs painted in our lobby, and there was a couple times I smelt a substance when I came into the lobby that I hadn't smelled since a fraternity at Stanford. And so I began to worry a little bit, so I said, you know what, let me take these kids out, and I invited some of my friends who had been involved in or connected to, in some ways, marijuana trade and stuff like that in the city. I thought if I could get them all together, that maybe we can talk to the kids. I took them out to movies, and I thought we were going to some kind of educational home improvement movie when they told me they wanted to go see Saw. But I got busy. I'm an adult, I'm a busy man, I'm important, I got places to go, I got busy. I had a big campaign to run, I had a big election, a big office I was seeking. I got so busy, I didn't follow through. The kids didn't stop being there in the lobby. I'd walk past them every night. And when my election got going, I'm a busy, important guy racing for a big office. They cheered and encouraged me. I remember one night I came home, they had a whole bunch of my lawn signs. They were waving them in my face, and I walked to the elevator. I felt so proud. I walked through, gave them like a presidential wave, got in the elevator. As soon as the elevator closed, I thought to myself, wait a minute, where did they get those lawn signs from? I got elected to mayor. I won in 2006. I was so proud. I was now a big title to my name. I'm now really important. Early in those days, I had some death threats, so I used to walk into my lobby in the projects. But now I'd have all these security guards and police officers around me, and the kids stopped hanging out in the lobby. and I didn't see that much of them. About a month into my time as mayor, I was running around the city because violent crime was the #1 issue for our citizens. And I was showing up at any time of the night, day or night, when there was a shooting, standing on street corners, talking to residents, knocking on doors, just trying to be there for them because this was the big mission. This was the big effort. About a month of that, and I'd show up on street corners, and there would be sometimes the body still lying on that street corner, but I was focused on my residents, letting them know this is not who we are. We're bigger, we're better, we're stronger. I'd literally sometimes stand in the street with people around me, and I would give this speech about we're gonna overcome this. And one day, and I think it was August, about a month after I had been in office, I arrived to a street. One person was being loaded into an ambulance, another body was covered by a sheet. I didn't pay much attention to that. This was near a senior citizen building in our city down around Court Street, and I was talking to seniors, giving them the speech, so determined, so feeling noble, and that I was fighting this fight and all of that. And I remember going home that night, and I was falling through my BlackBerry the next morning, and then I saw the name of the child that I barely even noticed or paid attention to on the street with the sheet covering him. I saw the name, and I almost just dropped my BlackBerry because the name of the kid in that particular murder was one of those boys who would greet me every single night when I came home, that God had put right in front of me. A kid that had charisma and humor and a good heart, a kid that reminded me of my dad in many ways. I'll never forget going to his services. It was a packed funeral home. I was that new mayor, and I stood in there, but I did not feel mayoral. I remember standing in the back of the funeral home as people came through, and I was numb because it was packed. The room was packed. From his friends, teachers, community activists, leaders, people from my building, all squeezed into this basement room in this funeral home, all packed together. And finally, I just couldn't take it. I didn't feel mayoral. I didn't feel like some leader. I just wanted to get out of there. I ran out of the funeral home, hustled out of the funeral home, jumped in a car, drove back to this new office of mine, and I'll never forget just locking the door in this huge mayoral office on Broad Street in Newark, and I just sat on my couch and felt such a sense of shame. How could all of us, crowded into a funeral home, be there for that boy's death? But we were not there for his life. Another child dying in our inner city, another black boy. Nobody knows his name. He's not on the national headlines at night. We live in a distraught present. We have failed to heal this country. We have deep wounds and scars. And the insanity of it all is we have the power to stop it if we, the people, truly invested in those words, liberty and justice for all. This is the calling of our country. This is the mandate of our very existence. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Well, we have imperfections. We have challenges. We have mountains yet to climb. But I have confidence that with the persistence, the indefatigable love in this room and others, of champions, many of whom I know, from the Secretary of Education to my incredible superintendent, Cammie Anderson, to people like Alma Powell, but more importantly, even the young people I've seen up on this stage, we have that power. And I believe now more than ever in this generation, there is no more excuses. We have the resources. We have the technology. We have the data. We are only lacking the collective will. I am confident. I am confident that if we stand together now, if we join together, we not only will be able to do a little bit better, I know we can find a way to get to the roof. Thank you.
They liked it. See, they liked it. That was great. Thanks so much. You got a couple minutes for a couple questions? They're going to bring chairs. Awesome. Thanks. Well, obviously, everybody hated that. That was fantastic. So I got to tell you, I went to high school in East Palo Alto, California. Really? And I want to ask you, it's sort of a question similar to what you were saying about being mayor when this young man died, about what it was like to be at Stanford. Very exciting, high-flying, elite place, and then doing work in the community in East Palo Alto. What's that do to your head?
You know, it's very jarring. I mean, that's definitely an area that was separated by the tracks, as you know that. Yeah. I mean, literally the other side of the tracks.
Yep.
And it frustrated me as a time that college is such a wonderful time to firm up the cement of your soul. You know, you have a lot of complexities. It's a time where you're understanding race and class and beginning to experience all of these things. But for me, it was a very defining moment where I began to understand some of the central themes in my life, and that so much of them had to do with this idea of service to others. And frankly, even my identity as an African American, I thought really stemmed not from the music I listened to, the food. You know, I like to luxuriate in a lot of the things as a part of my culture, as I know my Italian friends or my Irish friends or my Jewish friends do. But for me, ethnicity began to be a deeper meaning to it, which is this continuance of a struggle to make this country real for all of its citizenry. And when you have such stark racial disparities when it comes to the outcomes, that are compounded by generation, it's very motivating. And then for me, working with kids is the greatest gift I could have gotten in college, because I learned so much more from these amazing children than I did from myself, who showed me really there's just, forget all your presumptions. We're all the same, so much of the same. And the dynamism, the strength, the resiliency of these kids just inspired me to be of service and be engaged.
So let me ask you about the difference for the things that you care about between being a mayor, very close to the ground, you know, with people all the time, in the funeral home, the whole thing, and being a senator, which is at some remove from some of the things that you care about. How do you stay connected, and how do you feel about your role? We heard your passion about making change, about the kids that we all care about the most. How do you do that from your Senate role versus your mayor role?
Well, you know, the Wall Street Journal, I think, pointed out there's only been 21 Americans who's ever gone straight from being a mayor to the United States Senate. And I really savor that unique experience that, God willing, I bring to this really august body. But you stay connected. My mom, who was with me for my inauguration day, and she was very pointed to me. She was like, you know, don't get carried away by all this, you know, this ornate building. And I think she was definitely impressed with the place. But she said to me, she said, you know, son, don't forget that the title doesn't make the man has to make the title. And so for me, I don't want to forget why I'm here, which is very simply because of this mission I felt from my parents bringing me up. You know, my dad was born poor, and if he was in this room right now, he would heckle me and say, don't tell those people I was born poor. Tell them the truth. I was born P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. I was a Po boy from North Carolina. And so he was born poor to a single mom in a segregated environment, not unlike many of the children in Camden and Newark and Patterson and Trenton. And amazingly, my father, who rode this wave of American success that was defined really by two things: one, economic expansion, and the second was an outrageously amazing level of activism and engagement that opened up doors for blacks born in the 1930s and 40s suddenly to land in places like Washington, D.C., where my parents met. My father had the luck and the fortune to meet my mother, and my mom had the charity and to marry my dad. The two of them met here, and because of the activism of people in Washington, D.C., through the Urban League and others, they got their first jobs with companies that really didn't have a tradition of hiring blacks. And so my father said to me, as I got older and worked in Newark, he said, what is our country coming to that a child born poor to a single mom in a segregated environment in 1936 would have better chances to make it than a child born under the same circumstances? And when I started analyzing the data, social mobility, in fact, has declined in the United States compared to our competitor nations, that there are a lot of obstacles that my father's generation didn't face. And so my brother and I, my brother who's working in education in Memphis, both feel this understanding that in order for our generation to prove our worth, we can't allow my dad's worry to be the reality. And I'll say, just last thing about keeping connected in the Senate, 6 days before I was elected to the United States Senate in October, my father passed away. And so I came to the office really with this angels, in a sense, in my heart, pressing me never to lose sight that I'm here to focus on those issues that are going to make our nation more just, more equal, and more free when it comes to freedom to pursue your dreams and to manifest your genius.
That's great. You talked about that you're going to take up this cause around the over-judicialization of young men of color, especially. You know, we've been here celebrating the fact that we've reached 80% on-time high school graduation, which is a big accomplishment, but quickly pivoting to thinking about the other 20% and how we collectively can help to lead the nation and communities to focus on the real needs of those 20%. What's really going on in their lives? How do we respond to that? We know that suspension policies and so forth, criminalization of young men of color especially, is a big problem. So you stated the problem. What do we do?
So I think, first of all, we have to have a consciousness raising as our country. We have to expand sort of the consciousness of our country by first admitting how horribly wrong American criminal justice policy is, and that there are horrendous disparities that if an African-American boy is caught for doing what the last 3 presidents admitted doing, and I watch this, you know, if you have if one of my friends at Stanford was caught with a bag of marijuana or had a bag of marijuana, his chances of being caught versus an inner city kid are dramatically different. Their chances of being convicted is dramatically different. Their chances of the chances that the young black boy will get a much longer sentence and the like. So we have to first sort of admit that there's a problem. And by the way, if you're arrested for that same size of marijuana in the inner city, you're not going to just get convicted of intent with possession. You'll get possession with intent to sell. You're definitely going to be within 100 yards or 250 yards or whatever of a school. So it's just going to pile up. And then this mandatory minimums take over and forget it. In fact, just a data point for you to show you how this is a long slide toward death and destruction. If you're murdered in the city of Newark, the city I was just mayor of, if you're the murder victim in the city of Newark, you have an 85% chance that you were arrested before, an average of 10 times. And the most dangerous time for a human being in Newark, New Jersey is the first 6 months after you come back from prison. And so we also see that this is, so I believe that these hyper-arresting is making our streets less safe. I also know for a fact that we as Americans have to come to the grips with the fact that we're spending billions and billions of dollars needlessly. There are more people in jail today for nonviolent drug offenses than all the people in prison in the mid-1970s. So we're squeezing out. I sat with Attorney General Holder for breakfast about 2 weeks ago, and we discussed the fact that the Bureau of Prisons is squeezing out all of the rest of the budget for the Department of Justice. And we have to do something. So you're consuming human life, you're consuming taxpayer dollars, and you're making your streets less safe. So once we get people to begin to understand the data backing up all of those points, I think you create a more fertile ground for action. And so what do I believe we need to do? Well, the whole spectrum of the criminal justice system needs to change in common sense ways. So I've seen, and I can show you lots of data, that alternatives to detention work, that having lowering mandatory minimums, no relation to greater crime, drug courts, I can go through that, all the way to the prison system itself, where I talked to Attorney General Holder and I said, do we even judge our prisons? You know, I learned as a manager, manage what you care about, because people care about how they're being managed or what they're being measured for. Do our prisons even, or do we even measure the recidivism rates? Does this warden have a better recidivism rate than this warden? So there's a whole bunch of things that go on inside the prison that we need to be doing. So what you're going to see me start to do is everything, I'm going to start attacking the problem from everything from expungement rules, changing what happens in prisons, changing what happens in our court system. There's so many common sense things, that little tinkers here and there, that produce dramatically different outcomes in terms of the success of human life. There's some good bills in the Senate right now that lower mandatory minimums. I would like to see us get rid of mandatory minimums for things. We're supposed to have a separation of powers, but yet suddenly we try to have the legislative branch wanting to be the judicial branch, and that's outrageous and unacceptable to me. We need to be investing in reentry programs. We need to be investing in drug treatment programs. This is one that's huge for me. We need to be investing in mental health investment programs. Lots of people are being locked up for mental health issues that we should be treating and not incarcerating. So I want to be a part of a movement in this country. And the last thing I'll say that gives me a lot of hope is that this isn't some kind of left-wing liberal. I see this, one of my partners I'm working, or some of my partners I'm working on are Republicans in the Senate who believe passionately on this. There are incredible people that are Christian evangelicals on the right who may not agree with me on women's health issues, may not agree with me on gay marriage, but they are passionately in agreement with me on the over-incarceration in this country. There are fiscal conservatives like Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist who are together. So there's enough of a coalition out there for us to join together and really make end this perversion where the land of the free has more people in prison than any place on the globe.
Sounds great. It's good. We'd love to be part. I think there are lots of people in this room who would love to be part of that movement. So I have to say that in a previous life, I was a Senate staffer, and I'm very alert to the fact that you have to preside over the Senate at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you are going to be in trouble, and your staff is going to be in trouble if you're not there. So I think we'll just leave it there, and thank you for being with us.
And I will be sprinting out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here. It's great. See you again. Thanks very much for coming. So that was great. Thank you so much, Senator Booker, for joining us this morning, sharing those thoughts, some inspiration and some provocation too, which all of us need. In a moment, I'm going to share with you another short video from our friends at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, but I wanted to just give you a little sneak preview of what's happening the rest of this morning. We're going to hear from a series of master teachers, people from the Alliance, from the GradNation Alliance, who are on the leading edge of various key issues. So in a moment, we'll turn to that, but first, let's take a look at this little video from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Thanks.
Welcome back to American Graduate Day. I am Wes Moore. This August, we visited Ali Reyes as she began her first year at college in Savannah, Georgia. As a first-generation Latina student, Ali is facing tough odds. For every 100 Latino students, only 13 will graduate from college. Now, fortunately for Ali, she connected with an innovative college access program.
My name is Ahmed Alejandra Reyes, but I go by Ali. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I am an incoming freshman to Armstrong Atlanta University. This is my first week at college. I'm nervous because I'm meeting my new professors today, and I really hope that I'm taking charge of what I'm doing and doing the right thing. I'm excited to go to college, and I know that it would have been impossible to go without the help of Camino.
Melody Rodriguez runs Latino outreach programs at Armstrong Atlantic State University. and founded the Camino program last year.
This is my favorite part of the year. The first meetings, we're always pumped because we get to meet new students. It's super exciting.
As a former high school dropout herself, she knew firsthand the obstacles many Latino students face. But it wasn't until she began recruiting for Armstrong that she understood how pervasive these challenges were.
The students that were coming through the tables were not Latino, and as I was browsing around, I looked at a pocket of Hispanic students that were just sitting in the bleachers. I quickly found out that these students said that they could not go to college, that they had no access. Once my eyes were open to these issues, I started to see them more and more in every college tour that I went.
After 10 years of supporting Latino students on Armstrong's campus, Melody saw Camino as a chance to grow the Latino population in Savannah area colleges by helping high school students with college readiness and general advising.
Camino is not the only thing that got you here. You're not here because of us. You're here because of your effort and because you're able to make it. To see her blossom in a way and just grow so much from the services that she received in Camino College Prep to the point that now, she's graduated, she has financial aid, and she's here at Armstrong is just amazing.
I'm happy to be here. I feel like I'm not alone. I'm part of the community.
It really brings it home that what we're doing is important and that it needs to be replicated across the country so that we can graduate more Hispanic Latino students.
Thank you so much for everything.
All right, now,
I gotta go to
class.
Yes, to class before I'm late.
Don't be late to class. Stay in class.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kent Pickell and Dave Shapiro.
Well, good morning. When John asked us to do this, I said we would do our best two-man Laurel and Hardy routine. And unfortunately, he never asked me which one of us was the skinny one, which was a little bit of an insult, but I'm getting over it. We sit here today, really in many ways, on the shoulders of the men who sat here yesterday. Hector, who powerfully recounted the one woman who believed in him as much as his mom and who was there for him and taught us about the individual power of mentoring relationships. And Secretary Duncan, who then came up, lamented the fact that so many kids did not have the experience of Hector, of being confronted with that person who cares. And then ended by talking about the fact that in the 3 R's, we get rigor and relevance right, but we don't quite get to relationship. So in our 8 minutes together, we want to try to make 2 points with you. One, about individually what works and how we make relationships work for young people, and systemically, how we inventory which kids have relationships, don't have them, and how we intervene so that no young person walks that road in isolation. No young person walks it alone. First, we need to advance our understanding of the relationships kids need to succeed. We can't use relationships like a blunt instrument. We have to use them more like a scalpel. We have to be intentional about them. Which relationships for which kids to what outcome? And second, if we don't understand the ecosystem of relationships in kids' lives, the existing relationships or lack thereof, it is impossible for us to strengthen them to succeed. Because in the end, opportunity without support and connection is an empty promise. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. So I'm going to ask Kent to talk a little bit about the what of this issue with the relationships that they're working on at Search.
Thank you, David. So I should begin maybe a little bit provocatively by saying I have a problem with the term caring adult. I know it's the alpha promise, and it's why a lot of us get up every morning. Actually, I have 2 problems with caring adults. One, the term seems to describe a type of person that either you are or you're not. And if you want to do this work with kids, you have to be a caring adult, as opposed to a set of attitudes and behaviors that we can help people who feel called to work with kids and who do work with kids learn to put into practice caring. The second thing, though, and a deeper reason, is if we want to help kids develop the thriving mindset that Dion said yesterday he and Oprah share, which I would define as the commitment not just to get by, but to flourish, not just to thrive, but to survive, caring is necessary but not sufficient in the types of relationships in kids' lives that they need to succeed. That's why at Search Institute, one of the things that we have done is to develop what we're calling the Developmental Relationships Framework. It's come out of a 1.5 years of intensive research, and we released it on our website this week, search-institute.org. And what we hope the developmental relationships framework will allow us to do is give us a language and give us a framework for beginning to talk about the relationships that are so central to all of our work and to kids' lives. So the first component of the developmental relationship framework is expressing care, because the old saying is true. People don't care what you know till they know what you care. But then the other 4 components are equally critical: challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding possibility. And we think creating a language and a framework is worth our time and attention because, as we've said throughout this conference, relationships are so central to achieving our goals for kids in the future. My predecessor at Search Institute said relationships are the oxygen of human development. And 2 researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, I think, came up with a really wonderful way to frame it. They said relationships are like the active ingredient in a recipe. They're like sodium fluoride in toothpaste. You can get everything else right, but if you don't get the relationships right, you're not going to succeed. So we think one of the things we need to do in the years ahead is learn from people like Hector's white lady from Idaho that he talked about, these master relationships builders. Let me just say also, though, this has got to be authentic. What I would hate to see is a bunch of white people running around the country saying, you're a diamond in the rough, you're a diamond sure enough, and expecting that kind of magic to happen. But we need to go out and study these people who are master relationship builders, learn from what they're doing. And that's what we've done to come up with the developmental relationships framework that I hope you'll take a look at on our website. Part of the research was quantitative and mining the mountain of data we sit on at Search Institute. But part of it was qualitative, and we did interviews and focus groups. And I was in a large urban high school, and we asked, who are your best relationships builders? And one of them was their work experience coordinator. And so I went out and I interviewed her, and I said, how do you build these relationships with kids? And she said, well, actually, I've been at this so long, I have a technique. First thing I do when I get a kid on my caseload, was her term, I have a long enough conversation with them to find out what makes them tick. And then when I leave the room, I immediately go and I write it down, because, as she said, I'm too old, I'll forget it. And then she said, I'm really not making this up, she plans a time, not too soon and not too far into the future. She said her rough sweet spot is a week after the conversation, but not more than a month, when she goes back to the kid and she tells him or her, you know what, I was thinking about that thing we talked about when I was at home, and here's something that occurred to me. And she said to me, what I just said to that kid was, I'm thinking about you when I'm not on the clock. I'm not formally in my role. And I go back to him with specific feedback. And then what has happened, that kid feels seen. And I'll never forget the way she said it. She said, when that happens, I've got you and you're mine, in a good sense. I knew that there was something to learn there when I shared that story with a group of recent college graduates who are working with a youth development organization. And I told that story, and I looked around the room, and there were like 20, 22-year-olds writing this thing down like they were going to. So building developmental relationships, we think in the future, is something that we can be more intentional and strategic about, and we look forward to working with all of you in the years ahead to do that. And so, David, that raises the critical question of how we identify the kids who need those relationships in their lives.
So at Mentor, we just took stock of this with some research called the mentoring effect, and I encourage you to take a look, that actually takes the voices of young people, 18 to 21-year-olds, representative sample, and asked them how mentors came into their lives, informal or through mentoring programs throughout their childhood. And what it told us was that 1 in 3 young people say that by the age of 19, they have never had a mentor of any kind. Just let that settle in for a second. And think about the chances of success if by the time you reach 19 years old, you can't inventory that there's one person like that in your life. And so we began to look at how those mentoring relationships come into their lives. What are the delivery systems? Because the delivery systems aren't always going to be whatever our delivery system is, the nonprofit or the school or the faith-based institution. It's going to be through a lot of different ways. So what we've worked on to do at Mentor, and what we stand ready and willing to do with all of you as does Search, is to work on how do we get these relationships into the various contexts. We're not all going to be in the mentoring field. Not everyone's going to be called a mentor. But how do we make sure every young person gets met with this relationship? How do we close the mentoring gap so that when we do this again, not a single young person says, I never had a mentor until 19? Because we hear the success stories, right? And they can continue to be these sort of Horatio Alger, I was met with a young person, the Hector stories that are so powerful. But our job is to make them the norm. And to get to 90%, heck, to get to 100%, it won't happen without these stories becoming the norm. You've heard the intersections. And when we get rigorous about mentoring, as we've seen in school districts from St. Louis to Pittsburgh to New York City, we can attack some of these persistent issues like attendance, like college access and persistence, like advocacy for young people around school discipline through mentoring. It's a tool in our toolbox that we have to harness fully. So I just want to close for both of us. We've heard a lot of amazing voices over the last 2 days, and America's Promise has gotten together sort of an all-star team of powerful young people. But I think personally for all of us, there's a voice that calls us, right, to this work, and it cuts through all the data and research and websites that we go to. And that voice for me is a young man named Keontae, who is sort of the best part of my mentoring life. He's my mentee of 5 years. And the first day Keontae and I were ever riding in a car together, he was 11 years old, he turned to me and he said, "This is weird." I thought he was going to say, "You're weird," which would have been probably more apt. But he said, "This is weird." And I said, "Why is this weird?" And he said back to me in the innocence of an 11-year-old, "Because I never do anything bad enough or good enough to gain an adult's attention." And I let that settle in for a second and thought, I mean, we are in a room full of people with amazing intentions who people see us on airplanes and say you're doing God's work, which sometimes feel right and sometimes doesn't. But we are people who have the best intentions. But the way our system plays out is just that, right? The truth of an 11-year-old. We pay attention to the people making the most noise, either in a good way or a bad way, whether they be kids or adults. Our job together and the collective next frontier in our minds of education and youth development is to figure out how to identify the Keontaes, give them the relationships they need, connect them to home and school, and wrap ourselves around them so that we watch those percentages climb, but more importantly, no young person says what Keontae says, and every young person is met with a quality adult relationship. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate the time.
Please welcome Andrea Nielsen.
Good morning. It's an honor to be part of the great work that America's Promise is leading to improve graduation outcomes, and it's been amazing to work with their team as well as the Center for Promise on Don't Call Them Dropouts, a new study focused on raising up the voices of our nation's youth. At Target, a big part of our work is listening, because empathy is at the heart of all human-centered design. We take this approach to designing products and experiences for our customers, we call them guests, as well as making meaningful investments in the community. We understand the critical role education plays in a child's future success and that of our nation's economy. That's why we believe all children deserve a quality education regardless of race or socioeconomic status, and why every child deserves the opportunity to reach his or her full potential. That's why Target is committed to delivering $1 million. Do you guys hate this? What about the notes? They stick together? Oh my goodness. That's why Target is committed, and you heard Reba say this yesterday, to donating $1 billion for education by the end of 2015. And it's why we're committed to leveraging our resources to helping tell the stories and amplify the voices of our nation's youth. We need to remember that young people, like Matthew Hart, whom we just heard from earlier, are at the center of this work. He and others like him are the heart, the soul, and the voice of this movement. If we're to reach our 90% graduation goal by 2020 and get kids across that finish line and create the workforce and leaders of the 21st century, we need a clear understanding of their lives. We need to know their dreams, their struggles, their realities, and their triumphs. And we believe Don't Call Them Dropouts does just that. This landmark study gives voice to the young people behind the statistics, students who've left school for reasons that are often as reasonable as they are devastating. Let's take a look.
My childhood dream was becoming an NBA player.
I always told my parents I wanted to be an obstetrician.
My dream was to become a pilot in the United States Air Force.
I wanted to do a lot, like I wanted to be a singer, an actor.
I dropped out probably like the age of 16.
I dropped out of the 8th grade. I went from actually, participating in school activities to not going to school at all.
When I looked outside, it's like I was the only person that was going to school.
I was that person that your parents are like, oh, stay away from them, they're trouble.
I was from house to house, from couch to couch, and that's when I joined the gang. All I had was them. I didn't have no mom. She wasn't stable. She was my mom and dad, but she wasn't stable. She couldn't take care of me.
I was raised by a single mother of 4 children, and my father wasn't around.
Lived with my mom for several years. My mom then got incarcerated.
My 2 brothers was always in lockup.
I was living in the house with my stepfather for a while, and he used to do stuff to me. That's really what made me didn't want to do nothing. At the 16, I really didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go to school no more.
I'm still thinking in school about my, my outside life. I'm not just thinking about the work that's in front of me. How am I going to eat after this, after school? How am I going to take a shower? What am I going to do?
Some people just need to be heard. If you really care, actually care. Motivation, it plays a big role in people's lives. Support, motivation.
It's about understanding other people's feelings, and it's about changing the conversation. If you don't change the conversation, we'll never get anything done.
As you saw, Don't Call Them Dropouts will release on May 20th, during the height of graduation season, a time when we celebrate student achievement, and yet a time when we need to remind ourselves just how much work remains. As the summit concludes and you return home, I implore you to remember these voices, and more importantly, to act on their powerful words. They said it best. Young people just need to be heard, and if we're going to get anything done, we have to change the conversation. One person that's already changing the conversation is Dan Cardinale. Dan is president of Communities in Schools, the nation's largest organization dedicated to keeping kids in school and helping them succeed in life. Here to tell us more, on the stage right over there, is Dan Cardinale.
Thank you, Andrea, for your leadership and the extraordinary leadership of Target, really changing every day the course of young people's lives. It's a real honor to be with you all today. You all are the colleagues that collectively we work with across the country every day. I have 3 things that I want to share with you. You've heard a lot this morning, so 3 things are usually what you can remember, and they're pretty simple. One is about human freedom. The second is about a celebration, and the third is about a call to action. Human freedom I'll start with, and it was taught to me because I had the opportunity of an adult in my life who was very poor and illiterate. And when I was in college, I was learning Spanish, and she was learning how to read Spanish. And so together we learned. I spoke better Spanish, and she ended up learning how to read. Her name was Zoila, and she was an indigenous woman from Otavalo in Quito, Ecuador. At the end of the time together, she said to me, she thanked me profusely, and I said, well, actually, really, thank you. I'm now able to pass my proficiency exam, and I'll be able to graduate from college. And she said, no, I don't think you understand. Before I started these classes, I could only take one bus in Quito because they're color-coded, and I knew the color to get from my house to my job and back. Now I can read where the different buses go, and I can explore the city, and I can explore the city with my children. And in that instant, she taught me about the power of education, the power of human freedom, of making choices, of reading and being informed, and then deciding where you want to go in life. And I think that's what we're all about today. And so the second point is to celebrate the freedom of getting 80% of our young people over that finish line, capable of making better informed choices and being able to act on those choices. And I think it's incredibly important not just to experience the joy of our collective action together. We as Americans reached deep. We figured it out together. We fought, we disagreed, and yet we strove forward. And we developed collectively the will that translated into action that then has translated into results. And there's something very important for us to learn from that we are capable, we are immensely capable of fighting, of disagreeing, of co-creating, and of coming up with solutions. So freedom is possible. We've proven it. And now we have to think about, much like those young people we just saw in that video, of the 20% that aren't here, that won't be able to enjoy that freedom, that are destined in many cases to second-class citizenship at best. So what is it that we can take from our achievement? I think what I'd like to leave you today with was an important insight. The tools that we used to get to 80% graduation rate were primarily academic tools. We focused in on the classroom and on test scores and on getting kids reading at 3rd grade and ensuring that they were able to pass their high school proficiency exam. And we focused time and resources and an enormous amount of human capital into driving to that 80%. But today in America, 22% of the K through 12 students live in poverty. I don't think it's coincidental that we have still a 20% gap. And we know that poverty, as we've heard over the last day and a half, presents a set of challenges that are non-academic. More academic, rigorous pressure on kids and teachers may not be the solution. I would like to argue that when we start intentionally managing for the implications of poverty in schools and develop an integrated student support strategy, which is equally aligned with the other sets of academic supports, we stand a shot at enabling that rest of the 20% to enjoy the freedom that Soila taught me about in life, that she can make choices about where she wants to go. So we can't put down the toolbox that we've used to get to 80%. We need highly qualified teachers. We need incredibly good ongoing evolution and development in our academic strategies. But we must bring a set of tools that attend to the mental health services, that attend to the fact that many kids show up hungry and needing food and shelter and clothing, needing caring adults who are committed to understanding and listening to their story, partnering with them, and journeying together to graduation. So that's the challenge I put before us. To get to the 90% goal that we put before us, we're going to have to dig deeper, but we know we can. And we're going to have to co-create, and we know we can. And I'd like to now present someone who I think is leading that charge. As the CEO of the Corporation for National and Community Service, Wendy has produced a kind of momentum in the country, a belief that citizens rallying together are able to make a difference in the lives of communities and in particular in the lives of students across America. So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the CEO of the Corporation for National and Community Service, Wendy Spencer.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Dan, my good brother in service. Magnificent, erector set, discovery, matinee, scolded, hypnotist. Those are some of the words that James, the student that I tutor on Monday, yesterday, learned. We read a book together. These are new words that he didn't know the meaning of or didn't know how to pronounce. He now knows these words and the meaning of them and the context in which they were stated in the book that we read together. We also talked about cause and effect in our session. And this is a program called Reading Partners. It's an AmeriCorps program in Shaw Elementary School here in D.C. that recruits volunteers like me to come in and work in a very strategic way with students who need some extra help to learn to read, to learn to understand new words, to be excited about education. And I'm really proud that we've got AmeriCorps programs all over the country. And I'm really thankful that Alma Powell and John Gompertz are keeping our eye on the prize to make sure that everyone graduates. Thank you, Alma Powell. Thank you, John Gompertz. We're right here with you. And you, everyone in this room, you are our champions for America's future because you are focused very smartly on education. We have, in our Corporation for National and Community Service, today we have 75,000 AmeriCorps members. We have 315,000 Senior Corps volunteers in foster grandparents or senior companions or the RSVP program, serving in 60,000 locations across America. We have 6 priority areas. 6: environment, education, economic opportunities, healthy futures, disasters, and supporting our veterans and military family members. So we could take our budget and cut it 6 ways equally into those 6 very important areas. But we've chosen not to do that. We've chosen to invest half our funds in education. Not 1/6, but half. It's in the right area. Because we know that while we're supporting those other 5 areas, we know that investing in education supports those 5 areas as well too, in many, many ways. And it's very important, and many of you are our partners across the country in doing so. You saw the AmeriCorps members of the city year members this morning. Many of you have some of our grants that you're using to invest in your programs as well. But we took last year we announced that there's either an AmeriCorps member or a Senior Corps volunteer in one of our programs in 12,000 schools across America. 12,000 schools. We looked even deeper to find out in what type of schools. Of those 12,000 schools, 1 in 4 of them are persistently low achieving schools, chronically underperforming schools. So it tells us we're in the right places. But until this week, we had never really researched how many AmeriCorps members and Senior Corps volunteers are actually in schools today. We knew the locations, but really didn't know how many. So I'm here to announce that today, that we have, and what would you guess, maybe 10,000? I hoped it would be 15,000, maybe 30,000. Today, serving in schools, AmeriCorps members and Senior Corps volunteers, 82,100 national service participants. 82,100. I am really thrilled about that. And I want to enlist all of you, if you want to engage service as a strategy, as a part of the engine of your education success, tweet me, Wendy, CNCS, or contact our office, nationalservice.gov, and let us know. This past year, President Obama took the opportunity on July 15th to welcome President George H.W. Bush to the White House and recognize his work around volunteerism and service and the Points of Light Foundation and the institution of Points of Light that he started. And he recognized, together they recognized the 5,000 points of light that day. But President Obama also took the opportunity on that day at the White House, on the hot summer day, to announce a task force on expanding national service. We need more AmeriCorps members serving, more Senior Corps volunteers serving in our communities. So we are working very hard to do so. We partnered as one of the results of that. We partnered with the Department of Education and my brother in service, Arnie Duncan, and came up with School Turnaround AmeriCorps. We pooled our funds together so we could provide hundreds of AmeriCorps members in 68 of the chronically low-performing schools across the country. We visited, Arnie Duncan and I visited Stanton Elementary School a couple of weeks ago to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the School Turnaround AmeriCorps program. And we found something real exciting. In this, with the partnership that we pulled together, we found students at Stanton Elementary who were off track are now on track, ready for success because they have national service serving and working alongside them every single day. So we're excited about the fact that growing national service in education is the place we need to be. So if you want to engage national service as an engine to start up and really, really support your work, contact us and let us know, and we're going to be there for you. And we'll grow more AmeriCorps members. In fact, that little one I just heard is going to be an AmeriCorps member soon. See me in about 17 years. Thank you so much for supporting National Service and the Corporation for National and Community Service and our AmeriCorps members and Senior Corps volunteers and the 82,100 of them serving in schools right today across America. Thank you so much for that. I'm real pleased to introduce to you really great champions of service in many ways, personally and professionally. I would like to introduce Colonel Jim Eisenhower with the Warrior and Family Unit of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and my also good friend, Colonel Rob Gordon with Be the Change. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Wendy. You know, we're batting cleanup.
Sure
By
we
the way,
are.
doesn't he look beautiful in that uniform? Fabulous. Thank you for your service, Jim. You're doing a great
Thanks,
job.
and what you all don't know is this has a cooling mechanism under these lights, too, so I'm perfectly comfortable.
Well, you know, before I sit down next to you, we are batting cleanup. You've been sitting in your chairs for such a long time. Everybody stand up for just a minute. Just 1 second, stand up. You know, I was in the Army for 26 years. I still have that command voice. And what I'd like us all to do together is repeat 2 words. And you know, we're in a large hotel, so what I want you to do is really yell it out. See my son out there, I know you can speak very loudly. I see Bill Basil over here. It's we care. We care. Let's try it one more time. And I'm going to use my voice, and I want you to say it a little louder than me. We care.
We care.
Do you, Clifton? We care.
We care.
One more time. We care.
We care.
Have a seat, and we do, because we're here. I know you care. I know you care about our children. But it's not enough. It's necessary, Clifton, but not sufficient. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, especially in terms of our military children. I'd like to start off by asking you, Jim, about you, why you're here, why you're passionate about this issue of kids.
Well, sure, thanks. And thanks, everybody, for having us. We're thrilled, and it's an honor to be here. I am a special assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So on behalf of General Dempsey and his wife, Deanie, thanks for your attention to this type of service. I serve as the director of Warrior and Family Support. We are naturally interested in veterans and their families and the military family writ large, which for us means everybody who's ever worn a uniform or who is wearing a uniform, and certainly all of their family members, to include Gold Star family members. That includes children. It's important to me. I'm a product of DOD schools. I was a military brat. I've been in the Army for 44 years, although they're not paying me like I have been in for 44 years. And I've got 3 boys, all of whom have been in DOD schools at one time or another. There aren't as many as there used to be. And so as a father and as a parent, but also in my duties for the chairman, we are always interested in seeking solutions and encouraging others to embrace the progress and the things that we need to pursue to make sure our children have the best educational opportunities they can.
Terrific, terrific. You know, it's much the same for me. I was a military kid. We traveled throughout the world. I went into the Army after graduating from West Point, had 2 kids. My son Rob is here today, my other son Dan, so they were military children traveling all over the place. I went to 3 high schools, actually, when I was a young man. A Dodia school, a school that was a public school on a military installation. And finally, I graduated just from a regular high school, Palmer High School in Colorado Springs. So a lot of movement. The only thing constant in my life, I'm sure for you, the same, was my nuclear family at the end of the day. So my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister. And clearly my family when I was married, am married still, of course, but when I was in the military. So one question is, in terms of our kids, because we're both military children, how to think about empowering and caring for those kids so they can be the best that they can be. 2 million military kids, by the way, across the world, strewn across Asia and the Pacific and Europe and the United States. We both know about 7 Army values, and 2 of those values, respect and selfless service. How do those apply to caring for and empowering our children?
Sure, I'm glad you mentioned respect in particular, because one of the things we've realized is that every military child's different. And the military as a community has realized that deployments that we've all experienced over the past decade, the past 12 years, the reaction among children manifests itself differently. And we as teachers and as parents and as community members have to embrace and engage children. And I think we've become much better at it over time. Certainly the teachers have focused on doing that as well. But you've got to ask the question of the child. And I think we've learned to do that over the course of the last decade much more effectively than we would have otherwise, simply because every child is different. Some of them will voice and explain their anxieties and their concerns, while others will simply clam up. And so what we are pleased to see is not only the programs, but also all of the volunteer hours associated with those in the civilian community who are engaging military children and recognizing that they're enduring something different. And it's not just as simple as displacing from one duty location to another, but often dealing with the separation of a parent or a guardian or a trusted example and mentor to them for long periods of time, with the associated anxiety of combat, and that's tough.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, some of you in the audience might not know that we've got 2 million military kids, over 1 million are in schools across the world, but most of those children are in civilian schools, especially here in the United States. We have the Department of Defense Education activity. That's roughly about 190 schools across the world. But of those 1 million military kids, only 87,000 or so are in DoDEA. So it's important, of course, for our teachers and those who want to serve our children to know that our kids are throughout the United States in civilian schools. Last night I was at a social, and it was for young leaders who are emerging primarily in the business sector, but who are also focused on service. And I met a young man, African-American man, last night. He's off to the State Department, and I asked him, well, what have you done before, going off to the State Department? He said, I served a couple of years in Teach for America, in fact. I said, really? That's interesting. I've got a niece who's serving in TFA right now, and 4, in fact, relatives who served in City Year. And he said, yes, it was quite a trying time for me, but quite empowering for me too. He was able to affect children directly through that sort of service. So I'm here to say that caring is important, but not enough. You've got to then act at the end of the day, and this is where selfless service comes in. The fact that you just heard from CEO Wendy Spencer, and giving our young people and every American an opportunity to serve, and especially our children, is not only noble, but important in terms of their empowerment and realizing their dreams. I'm currently the president of Be the Change, and we are focused on improving the lives of Americans through, first of all, opportunity. We have 3 campaigns. One of those is Opportunity Nation, focused on empowering our opportunity youth. The second is Service Nation, and Service Nation is focused on providing an opportunity for every 18 to 28-year-old in this country to do service for at least 1 year. And the third is Got Your 6. It means I've got your back and you've got mine. And it's focused on caring for and empowering our military community, especially our veterans, and ensuring they're perceived as civic assets across the country. Nested within that is this notion of caring and respect, but at the end of the day, we still have to act. And in terms of that, what I'd like to leave you with, because we don't have much more time, is thinking about how you spend your day, Paola. We've got 24 hours. Some of it's for sleep, about 6 to 8 hours. Americans don't sleep much, by the way. But what's the rest spent on? For you. I'd like you to take one day and figure that out. actually write it down in a notebook to see how you spend your time. And if you can give just a little bit of that time to acting and caring for and empowering our children, imagine the hours and the days and the months of focus and energy around our kids. Take a look at that. One day and how much you spend your time on children, even if it's a smile. And with that, let me leave Jim with the final word in terms of what you want to tell the audience.
Sure, I'll try to inspire them to reach that standard. I don't know that you need historical precedent to be motivated, but if you do, try this on for size. 69 years ago today, Allied forces, more specifically American forces, liberated Dachau. That was a Nazi camp just north of Munich, Germany. More than 250,000 victims entered through their gates. And that's where we saw some of the worst experiments on human beings ever documented. But juxtapose that example and the fact that we as Americans and Allied forces rid the world of fascism too. And I think you'll realize that the 5 promises and the 90% are all well within reach. And I encourage all of you to join the rest of us that are working so hard to pursue service for these young children and for their education in that regard. Thanks for having us here today.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our morning session. Concurrent sessions begin at 10:15, and we will see you back here for the closing session at 12:30. Thank you.